Hello, good afternoon. My name is Maher Nasser. I'm the Acting Under-Secretary General for Global Communications, and I'm very pleased to welcome you here to the SDG Media Zone, taking place to coincide with the holding of the first Ocean Conference at UN headquarters in New York. So I'm very pleased to have with us one of the people who have been greatly associated not only in being involved in the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, but actually in the leading up the process as at the time special advisor to the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that worked with member states, with civil society organizations until the SDGs were adopted in September of 2015. And one of the SDGs, SDG 14, is of course relates to conserving and protecting the oceans. And now this conference from today until Friday is dedicated to the Ocean Conference. With me, of course, is the now Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Ms. Amina Mohammed, who, as I said before, was crucial in the process that led to the adoption of the SDGs. Deputy Secretary General, why is this conference on the ocean, one of the 17 SDGs, important, and why is it taking place now?
Thank you very much, Maher. Afternoon, everyone. Well, it's incredibly important because we've got an opportunity where we have the President of the General Assembly putting a focus on what he knows best, but what is also the first goal that will get this attention that brings the 2030 agenda to life in many, many ways. The way, what we breathe, what we eat, the potentials for, when I look at what the Chinese just did with the Belt and Road, and I see what the belt means through the oceans, if it can deal with migration and it can deal with the conflicts that we have as we go around the Horn of Africa and through the Mediterranean. But it really does, put a spotlight on the importance of what, covers most of Earth. I think there's a lack of knowledge to what we're doing to what is, for instance, a reef, which we would say, I heard yesterday being very eloquently presented as the forests that we see for carbon dioxide, and that is what it is for the oceans. So many important reasons why we should have this. We need to galvanize action, not just in New York, but to take it to country level, to get everyone involved. We see the number of commitments are coming. How do nations, whether you feel you're affected or not by the ocean, you are. And so I think this is just a wonderful opportunity to really dig deep into one of those goals that I would say if we did not put it at the forefront, it would be maybe left behind, and that's what we don't want to do.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the commitments, and one of the aspects of this conference has been a call for voluntary commitments, and I just checked before coming down, there were 753 voluntary commitments. Last week it was about 500. And these are commitments from governments, from international organizations, from NGOs, from foundations, from the private sector. Can you maybe tell a bit more about what individuals and others can do? Because this is a job for all of us. What some of the examples that people can do to help save our oceans?
Well, I think, yesterday we watched a couple of sisters who were just amazing because they had started a movement on just dealing with plastics in the oceans. And we know how much pollution that brings. And what they've been able to do is to really empower people to understand first better off what they're doing, change the way they behave, but also participate in cleaning up. And everyone can do that if you know what to do. And the assumption that you do know what to do is probably wrong, as these young girls, quite rightly told us yesterday. So that's one part of it. But governments too. Really need to look at their laws. They need to look at fishing practice. They need to look at the way business runs, so the core business models are changed in favor of protecting the oceans. This I think is now in the commitments. It's wonderful to hear just over 700 commitments. I was, at the weekend it was like 500, so they really have gone up exponentially. And it's a good reflection of more specificity to what do we mean around the world on a universal agenda, what we can do in the oceans.
And voluntary commitments is one thing. The call for action that is going to be adopted is another. What other concrete actions and steps that will follow from this conference?
I think a major commitment to making sure that Goal 14 isn't on its own. It is one of 17. It does have interlinkages with all the others, and that the commitment to to invest in the climate agenda, Paris Agreement, to invest in Agenda 2030 at the country level, to unlock those resources that we're talking about that can improve the technology so that we can think about recycling, we can think about reducing the pollution that we have in the oceans, and restoring the coral reef. All of these are possibilities, and I think this is a call to action. The call to action really is very specific, and everyone has a clear role and responsibility. It will be for us to keep that momentum going on the floor here, but also linked with our country teams. You'll know that we're reforming the UN development system to be more fit for purpose at the country level to deliver on 2030. And most of that is going, what does a country team look like? How do they engage with government? How do they partner with business and civil society? And more especially young people, because this is it's not just about their future tomorrow, it starts today. We're already seeing the detrimental effects, and you can still do something today about it.
Thank you, DSG. And I know that you're pressed for time, maybe a couple more questions. One is about, you mentioned the interconnectivity between the different goals. And of course, climate is goal 13, and ocean is goal 14, or life under the sea. And what is the linkage between the two of them that at this time, as we talk about climate being one of the existential threats, and conserving the oceans, which absorb 1/3 of the carbon dioxide and emit half of the oxygen that we breathe?
Well, very much so. I mean, I think here we're looking at the effects of climate change in the oceans. You've talked about that. I mean, it is sort of a death sentence as it stands right now for the oceans, and that cannot be possible, because then, of course, we will no longer be. But if we want to make the case, you look at the rising sea levels that we see because of the caps that are melting, and you see the damage that is being done to coastlines, the damage that is being done in terms of the barrier reef, the damage that's being done, that we see all this climate change in our extreme weather experiences, and these links are very strong. Now, the opportunity is what we want to look at, is that when we see that you have infrastructure that is going up with millions and billions across the coastlines, they will no longer be there tomorrow. So how can we effectively raise that alarm, but at the same time use technology better, and bring governments and people and business to see the linkages and to see the opportunities. But all of it for us is there. Jobs are there, innovation is there, energy, clean energy is there from the oceans, and that's what we need to see, is to really appreciate how that works. And my first experience of the challenges that a small island had, I visited Nauru because it was the smallest member of the family, and I wanted to see the most vulnerable member of the family. What do we do about it? Now, they were losing their food chain. Of course, their reefs had bleached, and they had lost what was, their food. But they had a very strange phenomena that had happened. That was those seas further out were rich with tuna. But this time, tuna, with the sea warming, had come south and became their challenge to their own fishing. So you would go out fishing with the fishermen in Nauru, and you'd find that the competition was with the tuna fish. Just when you thought you'd got it, they would get it. But then could they get the tuna? No. The illegal fishing, the huge companies that went out there to exploit. So, there are so many aspects to this that I think that for the first time we are bringing knowledge to people, but we're also bringing the solutions, and you can see those reflected in the commitments that we're getting at the United Nations.
And I think as individuals, we can, by our own consumption habits, also ensure that we're consuming sustainable fisheries, sustainable food that would encourage.
Well, that's your goal 12. I mean, I think it has never meant much to people when they see consumption and production. I mean, I see it when I walk through the airports, and it's like a shopping mall, and I'm just going consumption and consumption. We need to change this, the way in which we consume, and what is our footprint, and is it necessary? Are there not alternatives? And when you think of the damage that you're doing then I think, you begin to, it's a wake-up call for everyone. And that's what I hope, that the opportunity of the festivals, of the conversations that we have here today, and I'm sure as we go forward, the call to action and the commitments will be something that we will need to follow up with in terms of implementation.
Well, thank you very much. Today is, of course, World Environment Day, 5 June. So just if you want to say one word or two on that, and I know that your time is pressed, and we can end it here.
It is very much so. Well, I think for us on Environment Day is to remember that without the environment that we should have and should live in, there would be no tomorrow. And we need to protect that. We need to guard it, not just for ourselves, if we want to say in our self-interest, but also for our children, our children's children. This is the moral imperative for taking care of our environment.
Thank you very much for being with us, Deputy Secretary General.